My name is Kate Bentley, and I'm a clinical psychologist at Massachusetts General Hospital and an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. Far too many lives are currently touched by suicide. It's now the 11th leading cause of death in the United States across all ages, the second among young people. Over 48,000 people die by suicide each year in the US. It's also estimated that over 1.6 million people make a suicide attempt in the US, and over 13 million have serious thoughts of suicide each year. Another fact we've learned from recent research on suicide is that risk tends to vary over time. Recent studies that use smartphones and other mobile technologies to monitor people's experiences over time have shown us that suicidal thoughts tend to fluctuate a lot over short periods of time, days, hours, or even minutes. People can go from not thinking about suicide at all to having very intense thoughts of suicide over short windows of time. This may be in part why it remains difficult for clinicians to predict who will go on to make a suicide attempt and when these devastating events will occur. Almost all existing psychological treatments, such as forms of talk therapy like cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT, are delivered in relatively static and infrequent time intervals. For example, in CBT, people generally meet with their therapist once a week, with little or no contact between sessions. This makes many existing evidence-based interventions for reducing suicide risk not very well matched to how rapidly suicidal urges can change. Also, almost all suicide-focused therapies that we have require patients to remember when and how to use the skills they've learned in therapy when they're in the middle of or leading up to a suicidal crisis. This is, of course, when it can be the most challenging to remember how and when to use the coping strategies discussed in treatment. Finally, even though there are existing effective therapies, many people in need are still not able to access them. Most interventions are not designed to be accessed during the actual moments of experiencing strong suicidal urges, which can come on and change quickly. There are also many barriers to accessing evidence-based treatments that people at risk for suicide face. One is that there's simply not enough well-trained therapists to meet the growing mental health need. Another is that people at risk for suicide understandably may be hesitant to disclose that they're having suicidal thoughts to providers due to stigma about suicide or fear of unwanted consequences, like hospitalization. We think that being able to intervene in the precise moments the support is most needed and potentially least accessible could make a real difference in better reaching those at risk for suicide when they need it. One direction that we're pursuing is building and testing what are called just-in-time adaptive interventions for suicide risk. Just-in-time means in the moment. In this case, providing support to people at risk during the actual moments when support appears most needed. Adaptive means dynamic. In other words, support adapts to the needs of a given person over time. Given what we know about how suicidal thoughts can change quite quickly, a just-in-time adaptive intervention would adapt or vary in response to personalized changes. There are many forms that a just-in-time adaptive intervention for suicide risk could take, but one that we're developing and evaluating here involves patients leaving a hospitalization for suicide risk, doing brief check-in surveys on their smartphones. When people report having high suicidal urges, they receive, right away, tailored, personalized automated messages through their smartphone that provide a few different types of support. This might include reminding them of coping skills they've found helpful before and discuss with providers during hospitalization, or encouraging them to contact a specific support person in their life or 24/7 available anonymous hotline for support. Ultimately, the goal here is not to replace existing modes of treatment or care, but instead to build upon, reinforce, and overall make more accessible the existing suicide prevention strategies that we know are effective.